So we're going to talk about the hero's journey, but I want to relate it not just to movies, but to our lives as well. Okay, so I hope that you found this to be a very interesting unit. I really only discovered the hero's journey in the last couple of years, and I must say it's been a game changer for me, not only in terms of how I see film, but how I view life. So if you begin to wrap your head around this, it really can be a like mind-blowing kind of concept. This comes from a guy named Joseph Campbell that I, wrote about in my intro to the week. And he died in the 1980s, but there's a lot of old television interviews with him. There's a really good one by Bill Moyer, who was a famous journalist at PBS for a long time. And there are all kinds of different series on him and the stuff that he explored. And what he did was he was just a really, really curious person. He was very interested in religion and philosophy, and he started studying cultures from all over the world. And he found that there were real patterns, that there seems to be similarities within human beings that are universal. And we all tend to go through sort of similar journeys. I think I had this idea that life sort of went in a straight line. So sort of like this, like, okay, you're born, right? You're born, and then you go to school, right? And you go to school for 12 years or whatever. And then you graduate from high school, and then maybe you go to college, maybe you don't. And then you try to find that career, that you could call it different things. Some people look for a job, some people look for a vocation, a career. Some people just want to earn a paycheck, and that's good enough, and they think that that's all they can do. Other people are like, no, I want to really do something meaningful. I want to do something that makes me want to get up in the morning, something that I love, something that I'm passionate about. And I would say to you that I hope that you are on a trajectory so that you're not just going to sort of skate through life and just get a paycheck and just blah, 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 but that you really, really do engage in things that are meaningful to you and that bring a lot of fulfillment and that make a difference. So you get that career going, right? And then maybe you get married somewhere along in here. That's sort of the social norm. Not everybody does, obviously. I never married. And then maybe have some kids, right? And then you just enjoy life, right? And then you eventually retire, and maybe you get an old camper like I'm fixing up, and then you want to go traveling and you just want to do some things, and then you die, right? So it's sort of this like, oh, okay, you just get on this trajectory, and that's life. But I found out that life kind of really doesn't work that way. Life is kind of more like this. Life is sort of all over the place. We hit walls, don't we? When you think about what do you do when you hit a wall? Seth Godin wrote a book about what do you do when you hit the wall? So what do you think would be possibilities? So you're going along through life and suddenly you come and there's a brick wall. What are your options? What are your possibilities for that when you hit that wall? What are some different strategies you could take? So you can climb it, you can dig under it, you can try to go around it, you can try to blow it up, or you can just go home, right? And a lot of times people hit the slightest little obstacle and they just run back home. It's just like, no, I ain't doing that. So we do have options, but there are lots of walls in life, are there not? We find that there's this cycle of life, right? So you see my little seed here? That's a seed that's starting to sprout. So just this week, I planted some tomato seeds. And I don't know if they're going to work or not, but it's like way cheaper than going out and buying tomato plants, right? And in Colorado, we have such a short season. Sometimes it's good to start stuff in the house. So you can bet I'm going to be looking in those little pots over the next few days and weeks to see if anything's happening. And hopefully I'll start to see some little things, right? So there's this concept of life and death, right? The Bible talks about unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it will never bear fruit, right? So we have lots of examples of this. So we have leaders from history. Jesus, right? Jesus had to go out into the desert and face his demons, not only the external demons, but the internal demons. And we all struggle with stuff, right? We all have a shadow self that sort of drives us, that we have needs, we have an ego that we often want to protect, we have temptations that come our way, and we have to figure out what we're going to do. And Jesus was 40 days in the wilderness and then came back, had his ministry, and then eventually made the ultimate sacrifice, right? Giving up of his life. Gandhi fought for respect and equal rights for Indians. He got spat on, he got put in prison, he got like lots and lots of stuff. He hit lots of walls and he had choices to make in those situations. Mother Teresa, you know, it sounds real sexy to say, I'm going to go to India and save all the poor people. You think about what that might be like in terms of taking care of people that have lived on the street and have rotting flesh, and what it must be like to smell that and to look through the pain and the ugliness of somebody's condition and see the person in there and make a difference. And, you know, people all over the world know Mother Teresa's story because she was a servant. She continually gave her life. Martin Luther King, absolutely. He gave the ultimate price, didn't he? He was imprisoned. He was followed by the FBI. He was maligned in so many ways, and yet he had a sense of destiny and he was going to break through, and he went and he just did it, right? And then he gave his life as well. And then just a more recent person, I think, John McCain. And no matter what your politics, I think you would admit that John McCain spent a lot of time in a prison camp during the Vietnam War, and he came through that a different person. And if you ever saw him when he was still alive, he'd try to lift his arms and his arms were funny. That's because he was like put in really horrible positions for very long periods of time. So he suffered. I would say that Joe Biden is also a person who has come through, dealt with hardship and let it make him a better person. He's a very compassionate person, and he lost his first family. His wife and daughter were killed in a car accident, and then later he lost his son Beau to brain cancer. And you see what people look like when they've been through great hardship. They often become leaders, but they have become softened and they're just better people. Think about the butterfly. The eggs get laid, right? And the eggs turn into a caterpillar. It has to go through this chrysalis process and eventually becomes a butterfly. So we have examples of this all throughout creation, all throughout nature. Think about the seasons. Things will start sprouting, and then we get to have summer, which is like full growth and everything. And then we have fall when everything starts seemingly just freaking dying everywhere, which I find somewhat depressing. It does tend to have nice weather that goes with it, but everything's just dying, drying up and falling. And then we have the long dark days of winter when it's just like everything is dead. And yet it's part of the process. And we couldn't have the spring and summer if we didn't have the fall and winter. So the hero's journey is this thing that Joseph Campbell came up with as he studied myths from all over the world. And we see that this tends to be the basic pattern in films. It's also the basic pattern in life. There's different ways we could look at that. So all of us, you know, we're sort of living in this ordinary world, right? And we get this call to adventure, and the call to adventure could be anything. It could be to learn a new skill. It could be to conquer a certain fear. It could be to do things that you feel uncomfortable doing. We all get those. We all get those opportunities. Most people don't like suffering. Most people don't like pain. I mean, raise your hand if you like pain. And so there's a tendency to want to refuse the call because it's like, I ain't going there. And I would say that right now, we're in a very interesting place as a world population with COVID, because it is forcing us to make some changes, both individual and systemic, cultural, societal changes that we didn't really want to make. But every once in a while, I think the universe wants us to grow so much that the universe interrupts our ordinary world and calls us to the adventure. We meet the mentor. So, in Star Wars, that's Obi-Wan Kenobi. Think about, there's been people in your life that give you hope and courage and information that helps you go to the next step. It would be an interesting exercise to sit down and think about, who are the people that have really influenced my life and helped me grow and helped me become a better person. We cross into this other world. So if we've said yes to the call, or if we've been forced into it sometimes, like now, there's this initiation process where we go through tests and trials and all kinds of stuff, right? And right now, it's kind of been a hard year, huh? We've had lots of tests. And so I've dealt with this stuff in me this year. I've tried to become a better person. I've reflected a lot on my life. I've made a lot of changes, and the reward will be that I get to start my journey back toward normal life. I haven't eaten in a restaurant in almost a year, but dang it, we're going to do that, right? Coming back to the world. And so the resurrection, you start to come back through this thing, and then you get to re-enter life. I'm looking at getting my band back together when we can practice safely. And doggone it, we're coming back, right? But I'm going to come back to this world in a different way. So it kind of looks a little bit more like this, that you come back different. You come back from tough times to a higher plane. And then it's like, okay, so then what are you going to do with that? And as a teacher and as one who likes to improve things and people, I feel very much a call to challenge people to be on this path, to change, to grow, to be a better person. I think all of us know people that have consistently refused the call. They don't want to grow. They don't want to change. They don't want to think a new thought. And they haven't said anything new in the last 20 years because they're just totally stuck, and they just rather sit in their easy chair watching TV all day than to have to think about anything or give to the world or just grow. Life is interesting. Sometimes life looks like this. Yeah. So to what extent are you incorporating the opportunities you've had in your life to be better? All the messiness, are you sorting that through? Are you growing? Are you being better? So think about your journey. Okay. So these are just some questions that I would ask you. What are you being called to? And, it's not necessarily go to Africa and feed the poor. It can be small things. It can be reaching out to a neighbor. It can be dealing with your tendency to judge people too quickly. It can be so many things, both internal and external, but mostly internal, right? I think a lot of times we think that the problems are out there, and so we have to deal with all these external forces. So you may have heard the story that a couple of days ago, a 21-year-old guy in Atlanta went and shot up a bunch of people at massage parlors. The guy has admitted to having a sexual addiction problem. And I can only use conjecture to think that he saw them as a threat, that if he could wipe out sex workers, that somehow it would deal with his internal problem. And that's basically what's come out about the story so far. We do that. We attack other people. We blame other people. We demonize other people. We do all this stuff except deal with our own shit on the inside of us, right? And we all have pain. We all have stuff to work through. What have you said yes or no to? Who are your mentor guides? I bet if you think about it, you can identify key people throughout your life that really, really, really made a difference. I go back to my 8th grade history teacher who just during a horrible period in my life was just a bright light, who just cared about me. And I lived to go to her class. My good friend that's coming in 3 weeks, she was first a life coach for me when I was doing a life coach training. And she gave me permission to explore certain areas of my life that I had been told were not okay to explore. And it had completely changed my life. And then, of course, we became best friends. What kinds of tests are you facing? What are you learning? How are you changing? What are you learning to master? And how are you bringing that message back to an ordinary world? So the thing about the hero's journey is we don't just go through it once, right? We get to go through this lots and lots and lots in life. So it's kind of like if we take that initial line, we can just keep making these loops that just keep, because we have these opportunities. And thank God we have these opportunities. I'm so glad I'm not the person I was 5 years ago or 20 years ago. So think of a film you've all seen within your group and chart the story using the hero's journey to see if you can identify who the key players were, what the key situations were, and what have you learned about humanity through this lesson of the hero's journey. This is a humanities course. What is humanities? Humanities is the study of all things human. And so if we can just talk about film and we can compartmentalize that and say, oh, this is the structure that films take, but what is the bigger picture? The bigger picture is a message to all of humanity. How will this affect how you view films? And how will this affect how you live life? I hope that that was a helpful discussion for you. And this is a helpful unit. And, thank you for reminding me of, the whole resurrection part. So we have the resurrection of Jesus and we have Easter coming up, right? So not only did Jesus rise from the dead, but created a whole movement that is still in existence. And education, hospitals, all those kinds of things came out of the Christian faith. Gandhi brought huge changes within India. I've been to India twice. You go to every small little village and there's a statue of Gandhi in the tiniest little places because he's so revered as being a hero for their rights. Mother Teresa started the Sisters of Mercy, and they have locations all over the world serving the poor. Martin Luther King, of course, with the civil rights movement, and which is still an ongoing struggle. But yes, there can be long lasting effects. And we tend to think that I think we tend to think that we're isolated and we don't really affect other people, but we in fact do. And everything in life is like throwing a pebble into a pond, then those rings go out.